Welcome to Billionaire Heart Stories, where wealth is measured not in dollars, but in dignity. We tell stories about the hidden kings among us, the quiet millionaires disguised as ordinary workers, the powerful souls concealed behind humble faces, men and women who possess empires but choose to see the world through the eyes of those society overlooks. Here, the arrogant fall, the kind rise. And poetic justice isn't just a concept, it's a promise. Because a true billionaire heart isn't built from inheritances or stock portfolios. It's forged in the choice to value human worth over social status, to fight for love instead of convenience, to recognize that the greatest fortune is knowing who truly matters when everything else is stripped away. This is not a story about money. This is a story about what makes us human. Welcome to Billionaire Heart Stories. Logan International Airport, Terminal E, October, 11:47 p.m. The fluorescent lights of Logan's Terminal E had a way of making exhaustion look like disease. Lucas Grant noticed this as he stepped off his private jet, every muscle in his body protesting the 48 hours he'd just spent presenting at a medical conference in Geneva. The air smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner, that particular airport cocktail that existed in the same synthetic note whether you landed in Boston or Beijing. David Thornton walked beside him, scrolling through tomorrow's calendar on his tablet. Engagement party, final planning at 9, board meeting at 11, Forbes photographer at 2. Victoria wants to know if you prefer the ice sculpture of swans. Or Lucas wasn't listening. His mind had that peculiar emptiness that came with jet lag and something deeper, a hollowness he'd carried for 3 years, since the day he'd returned from a business trip to find his housekeeper gone without explanation. She found better employment, Thornton had said, left suddenly, didn't even ask for a reference. Strange, Lucas had thought then. How a person could shape the architecture of your daily life. The way she'd leave ginger tea on his desk during late nights, the sound of her humming while she read medical journals during breaks, and then vanish as if she'd never existed at all. They were cutting through Terminal E toward the private exit when Lucas saw her. At first, his brain rejected the information. Jet lag hallucination, wishful thinking. But no, even from 30 feet away, even with 3 years of distance, he knew the angle of her shoulders, the way she tucked her hair behind her left ear. Maya Rodriguez curled on a metal bench near Gate E7, sleeping with the exhausted stillness of someone who'd learned to rest anywhere. A thin blanket, the kind airlines gave away in economy, barely covered 2 small shapes pressed against her chest. Lucas stopped walking so abruptly that Thornton nearly collided with him. "Mr. Grant, is something—" But Lucas couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, because he was looking at those 2 small shapes. Children, toddlers maybe. And even from this distance, even in the terminal's harsh light, he could see the curve of their cheeks, the set of their small jaws. They looked like his childhood photographs. They looked exactly like him. His mind began calculating, with the mechanical precision of someone who'd built a billion-dollar diagnostic company, 3 years since Maya left, 9 months of pregnancy, which meant these children would be approximately 2.5 years old. The math slammed into him with the force of a freight train derailing. Impossible, his rational mind insisted. The fertility diagnosis 3 years ago had been definitive. Severe oligospermia, less than 1% chance of natural conception. He'd mourned the family he'd never have, thrown himself into his work, agreed to marry Victoria because what did it matter if he could never be a father? Anyway, but impossible or not, those little girls sleeping in Maya's arms had his widow's peak, his mother's nose, the biological mother he'd never known but had seen in one faded photograph from the foster care system. "Sir?" Thornton's voice held a note of concern now. "We really should—" "Maya," Lucas whispered, and the name felt like archaeology, excavating something he'd buried because it hurt too much to hold. He started walking toward her, drawn by a gravity that had nothing to do with logic. As he got closer, he could see how much thinner she was, the way exhaustion had carved shadows under her eyes. Her clothes, a faded hoodie and patched jeans, told a story his chest physically ached to understand. A security guard passed nearby, muttering to his colleague, "That's the 3rd night she's been here. Someone should call social services." 3rd night, the words detonated in Lucas's mind. Maya had been sleeping on this bench, with 2 toddlers, for 3 nights. He was 5 feet away when her eyes fluttered open, that split second of sleep-soft confusion before consciousness crashed back in. And then she saw him. The first emotion that crossed her face wasn't relief, wasn't surprise, wasn't even recognition softened by time. It was fear, pure, animal, protective fear, as her arms instinctively tightened around the sleeping children, as if he'd come to take them away. "Mr. Grant," she whispered, voice hoarse from exhaustion or unshed tears or both. Please don't." And Lucas realized with devastating clarity, she thought he was here to destroy her. Logan, International Airport, Terminal E, 11:52 p.m. Maya's mind was a cascade of nightmare scenarios, each worse than the last. She'd been so careful for 3 years. No social media footprint, no contact with former employers, nothing that could lead Lucas Grant back to her daughters. And now here he stood, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and cedar-based that reminded her of the life she'd briefly touched before being cast out of it. The terminal around them hummed with its late-night rhythm, the distant whine of jet engines, the metallic voice of arrival announcements, the shuffle of exhausted travelers hunting for gates. Gate E7 sat in the international arrivals section, where the fluorescent lighting made everyone look vaguely ill, where the metal benches were designed to prevent exactly what Maya had been doing, sleeping. Her daughters were warm weights against her chest. Sophie's small fist clutched Maya's shirt even in sleep. Emma's breathing had that whistling quality she got when she was deeply exhausted. They'd been at this airport for 14 hours because Maya had missed the 7 a.m. bus to Providence. Not enough. Money for tickets, too proud to beg, too tired to keep moving. And now Lucas was looking at them with an expression Maya couldn't parse. Was it anger? Calculation? The cold assessment of a billionaire discovering an asset he hadn't known existed? Maya. He said her name differently than he used to. Softer, like he was approaching something wounded. Are those, she should lie. Every survival instinct Maya had developed in 28 years of life screamed at her to lie, to grab the girls, and run, to disappear again, before he could take them from her. But she was so tired of carrying this alone, so exhausted by the weight of 3 years of secrets. They're yours, she whispered. The words hung in the recycled airport air between them. Lucas's knees seemed to buckle slightly. He reached for the bench to steady himself, and David Thornton, who'd been hovering behind him with the anxious energy of someone who sensed his world tilting, suddenly understood what he was witnessing. His face went carefully blank, the expression of a corporate soldier calculating damage control. Mr. Grant, Thornton said, already reaching for his phone. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private. Don't. Lucas's voice cut through the terminal noise with absolute authority, the voice of a CEO who'd built an empire through force of will. His eyes never left Maya's face. Don't call anyone. Don't do anything. He crouched down slowly, bringing himself to eye level with her. This close, Maya could see he hadn't been sleeping well either. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago, new lines bracketing his mouth, grief or guilt or just the general erosion of time, she couldn't tell. He looked at the sleeping twins with such raw, undisguised longing that Maya's throat closed. What are their names? His voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter whatever fragile reality was forming between them. Sophie and Emma. Maya heard her voice crack. They're 2.5, born May 3rd at Boston Medical Center, 5 pounds, 4 ounces, and 5 pounds, 6 ounces. Sophie came first, Emma 6 minutes later. She stopped herself. Why was she telling him this? What did these details matter to a man who hadn't known they existed? May 3rd. Lucas repeated it like he was doing math in his head, and he was, Maya realized, watching his face. Counting backward, 9 months from May to August of the previous year, which meant conception, in late June. His eyes closed briefly, and when they opened, something fierce burned in them. You were pregnant when you left? It wasn't a question, but Maya nodded anyway, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Why didn't you tell me? The question was so absurd that Maya almost laughed. Would have laughed if she weren't so close to crying. I tried. Your assistant said you were in Asia for 6 weeks and didn't want to be disturbed with staff issues. When you came back, Victoria announced your engagement at that company event. I watched from the kitchen service entrance while everyone celebrated with champagne. I realized I'd been delusional to think she cut herself off. Wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing she'd had feelings for him, that she'd thought their night together had meant something beyond comfort and loneliness. Lucas turned to look at Thornton, who was suddenly fascinated by his phone screen. Is that true? Lucas's voice had gone dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded earthquakes. Did Maya try to contact me? Thornton's silence was answer enough. Confirmation and confession rolled into guilty quiet. Get out, Lucas said. Mr. Grant, I was following Victoria's instructions. Get out. Yeah, Lucas stood, and suddenly he wasn't the gentleman Maya remembered, but the billionaire CEO who'd built Grant Innovations through strategic ruthlessness. You're fired. Security escort, surrender your credentials, legal will contact you about NDA violations, go. But Thornton opened his mouth, to protest, to explain, to salvage something, but he saw Lucas's face and thought better of it. He left without another word, his footsteps echoing on the terminal's polished floor. Maya watched this exchange with growing panic rising like floodwater in her chest. This was exactly what she'd feared. Lucas taking control, reshaping her life according to his will, making decisions she'd have no power to stop. She tried to stand, but her legs were asleep from sitting awkwardly for hours, pins and needles shooting through her calves. Emma woke first, immediately starting to cry with that cranky, overtired wail of a toddler who'd missed her bedtime by 6 hours. "Shh, baby, it's okay," Maya soothed automatically, her body moving through the practiced choreography of motherhood, lifting Emma to her shoulder, the gentle bounce, the soft humming of a lullaby, whose words she'd forgotten, but whose melody lived in her muscle memory. Lucas watched her with an expression that Maya couldn't name, something complicated and raw and aching. "How long have you been here?" he asked quietly. Maya didn't want to answer, but Emma's crying was attracting attention from other travelers, and a security guard was starting to walk their way with the purposeful stride of someone about to ask questions Maya couldn't afford to answer. "Since this morning." "That's 14 hours. Lucas's voice went flat with horror, with the kind of shock that came from suddenly seeing your own privilege reflected back at you. "You've been sleeping on a bench with 2 toddlers for 14 hours? The bus to Providence leaves at 7 a.m. I was going to... Providence? Why Providence? There's a shelter there, with space. The wait list in Boston is..." Maya stopped. Why was she explaining herself to him? She'd spent 3 years learning not to depend on anyone, not to justify her survival. She stood up, hiking Emma higher on her hip, with the practiced efficiency of a mother who'd learned to do everything. One-handed, Sophie started stirring too, confused by the tension radiating from Maya's body, by the presence of this stranger who somehow felt important. "I need to go," Maya said, but the words rang hollow. "Where?" She had $23 in her pocket, 2 hungry toddlers, and nowhere to sleep. Lucas seemed to read all of this in her face. The desperation, the exhaustion, the mathematics of poverty that never quite added up. He did something Maya never expected. He took off his cashmere coat, the one that probably cost 3 months of her former salary, and gently draped it over Emma's back. "You're freezing," he said quietly. "The girls are freezing. Please, let me..." "I don't want your money," Maya said fiercely, because that was the accusation she'd been preparing for, the assumption she knew would come. "I'm not offering money." Lucas looked at her with those heartbreak blue eyes that had undone her 3 years ago. "I'm offering help. There's a difference." The distinction felt important, though Maya couldn't articulate why. Emma had stopped crying, lulled by the warmth of the expensive coat. Sophie was watching Lucas with curious eyes, her father's eyes, though she didn't know it yet, and Maya stood there in the fluorescent purgatory of Terminal E, holding her daughters, wearing another woman's cast-off hoodie, and tried to decide, was Lucas Grant her salvation or her destruction? Before she could answer, a familiar voice cut through her paralysis. "Mr. Grant!" Elena Rodriguez appeared at the terminal entrance, carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking frantically around the arrivals area. When she spotted Lucas and Maya together, when she saw the twins in Maya's arms and Lucas standing close enough to be protective, her face flooded with relief and terror in equal measure. She knew something, had been hiding something. The question was, would she finally tell the truth? Logan International Airport, Terminal E, Private Lounge, 12:15 a.m. Elena Rodriguez moved with the urgency of someone who'd been carrying a secret so long it had calcified into her bones. She set down the coffee cups on a nearby bench, cheap airport brew in paper cups that cost $7 each, and touched Lucas's arm with a familiarity that surprised Maya. In the 3 years since Maya had left, clearly some hierarchy had shifted. "Mr. Grant," Elena said quietly, her accent thickening the way it did when she was anxious. "I need to speak with you, privately, now." The words carried weight that made Lucas's jaw tighten. He looked torn, pulled between the little girl who'd just asked him to pick her up and whatever urgent truth Elena was clearly holding. Maya made the decision for him, pulling Sophie back against her chest with perhaps more force than necessary. "It's okay, baby. Stay with Mama." Sophie's face crumpled in that precursor to crying way that all mothers learn to recognize, but Maya bounced her gently, murmuring reassurances that tasted like lies in her mouth. She watched as Elena led Lucas 10 feet away, near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the tarmac. Outside, a plane taxied slowly through the October night, its running lights blinking red and white against the darkness. The window glass reflected their images back, Elena small and tense, Lucas tall and increasingly rigid as he looked at whatever she was showing him on her phone. Maya couldn't hear their conversation over the ambient airport noise, the whir of floor polishers, the beep of service vehicles, the eternal hum of ventilation systems pushing recycled air through miles of ductwork. But she could read Lucas's body language. The way his shoulders went back as if bracing for impact, the way his hand came up to cover his mouth, the way he had to grip the window ledge to steady himself. Whatever Elena was showing him, it was destroying him. Maya shifted Emma to her other hip, felt the familiar ache in her lower back that came from carrying 25 pounds of toddler for extended periods. She'd developed muscles she'd never had before motherhood, in her arms, her core, her capacity to function on 4 hours of sleep. But she'd also developed fears she'd never imagined. The fear of her daughters going hungry, the fear of failing them, the fear of men like Lucas Grant who could take them away with a single phone call to family court. She watched him now through her own exhaustion, through 3 years of survival that had taught her to trust nothing that seemed too good to be true. He wore a suit that probably cost more than she'd earned in 6 months of cleaning houses. His watch, she recognized it as a Patek Philippe. One of the brands the wealthy clients she'd worked for wore, could pay her rent for a year. Everything about him screamed power, control, the ability to reshape reality according to his preferences. And yet, there was something in the way he'd looked at Sophie and Emma, not as problems or complications, but as miracles he couldn't quite believe in. Something in the way he'd fired his assistant without hesitation, as if loyalty to Maya and the twins superseded years of professional relationship. Something in the way he'd given Emma his coat with such careful gentleness, as if she were made of spun glass. Maya had spent 3 years learning to read people for survival, which shelter staff would let her stay an extra day, which employers would pay under the table, which strangers on the bus were safe to sit near. And what she read in Lucas Grant terrified her precisely because it looked like sincerity. Lucas turned from the window, Elena beside him. His face had gone pale beneath his tan, and when he looked at Maya, there was something broken and furious in his eyes. "Did Victoria pay you to leave?" he asked, his voice rough. Maya's blood went cold. "How did you—" $5,000, a non-disclosure agreement, threats of legal action if you ever contacted me. Lucas crossed back to her, moving with controlled precision, like a man trying not to break apart. "She found the letter you left me, the one where you told me you were pregnant, and she destroyed it." The terminal seemed to tilt. Maya had to sit down, sinking onto the metal bench with both girls in her lap. You never saw it?" "I never knew it existed," Lucas's voice cracked. "All this time, I thought you left because you'd found something better. I thought—" He stopped, seemed to choke on whatever he'd been about to say. Elena stepped forward, her phone still in her hand. "I took a picture of the letter before Victoria burned it. I've kept it for 3 years, waiting for this moment." And she showed Maya the screen. There, in Maya's own handwriting, were the words she'd labored over for hours 3 years ago. "Dear Mr. Grant, I'm writing this because I owe you honesty. Even if it makes everything harder, I'm pregnant. The baby is yours. I know this complicates everything, especially with your engagement to Miss Ashford. I'm not asking for anything, I promise. I just thought you should know. I'll handle this alone. You won't hear from me again. But someday, if they ask about their father, I want to tell them you were a good man, because you were. You are. Thank you for treating me with kindness when no one else did." Maya read her own words from 3 years ago and felt something fracture inside her chest. All this time, she'd believed Lucas knew and didn't care. She'd built her entire survival strategy around the assumption that he'd chosen Victoria, chosen his billionaire life, chosen everything except her and their children. But he'd never known. "Victoria told me you were trying to trap me," Maya whispered. "She said you'd think I was lying, that you'd accuse me of wanting money, that—" Her voice broke. "She made me believe I was nothing." Lucas crouched in front of her, close enough that she could see the network of fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the muscle jumping in his cheek as he clenched his teeth. "You were never nothing," he said, and the words came out fierce, undeniable. "You made my house feel like home. Do you know how rare that is? I spent my childhood in 7 different foster homes, and none of them felt like anything except temporary. But when you were here, when I'd come home and smell whatever you were cooking, or find you reading in the library, I finally understood what home meant. And then you were gone, and it was just a building again." Maya was crying now, silent tears she couldn't control, couldn't stop. Sophie noticed and patted her cheek with a small, concerned hand. "Mama sad?" "Mama's okay, baby," Maya managed, but it was a lie. She wasn't okay. She'd spent 3 years building armor around her heart, and Lucas was dismantling it with nothing but honesty. Elena cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Grant, you should take them home. It's late. The girls need sleep, and Maya needs—" She trailed off, but they all knew what Maya needed. Safety, rest, a moment to stop running. Lucas stood, made a decision Maya could see forming in the set of his shoulders. "Maya, come home with me, please, just for tonight. Let the girls sleep in a real bed. Let yourself sleep without worrying someone will call the police. Tomorrow you can decide what you want to do, but tonight, please, let me give you one night where you don't have to be afraid." I can't accept." "You can," Lucas interrupted gently. Your daughters are hungry, exhausted, and sleeping in an airport. You can hate me tomorrow. You can leave tomorrow. But tonight, please. Let me do this one thing right. Maya looked at Sophie and Emma, both drooping with exhaustion. Emma's eyes were half closed, and Sophie had started the thumb-sucking she only did when she was past the point of tired. They deserved a bed. They deserved food. Food and warmth and safety. Maya had spent 3 years putting their needs above her pride. She could do it one more time. Just for tonight, she whispered. Lucas nodded, something like relief flooding his face. Just for tonight. But as Elena called for Lucas's car, as they began gathering their few belongings, a duct-taped diaper bag, a plastic shopping bag with extra clothes, Maya caught Lucas looking at the twins with an expression she couldn't quite name. It looked like wonder. It looked like grief. It looked like a man who'd just discovered he had everything he'd ever wanted and had no idea how not to lose it again. Mr. Grant, Elena said quietly as they waited. Victoria doesn't know yet, but she will by morning. When she finds out... Elena didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. When Victoria found out, she would try to destroy them. Again. Grant Manor. Beacon Hill. 1:30 a.m. The drive from Logan to Beacon Hill took 20 minutes in the hollow hours of night, when Boston belonged to taxi drivers and insomniacs. Maya sat in the back of Lucas's SUV, not the limousine, something more discreet, with the twins sleeping between them on the leather seats that probably cost more than her entire year's wages at the last cleaning job she'd held. Outside the tinted windows, the city scrolled past in fragments, the industrial sprawl near the airport giving way to the tunnel's fluorescent velocity, then emerging into downtown, where glass towers stood dark except for the lonely lights of overnight cleaning crews. Maya knew those crews, had been part of them, understood the particular exhaustion of scrubbing someone else's floors at 2 a.m. While your own children slept in a shelter, Lucas sat on the other side of the sleeping twins, not looking at his phone, which kept buzzing with messages Maya assumed were from Victoria, but watching Sophie and Emma with an expression she couldn't decipher. Wonder, maybe, or grief for the 2.5 years he'd missed. His hand rested near Sophie's small foot, not quite touching, as if he was afraid he'd break the spell if he reached out too soon. When they pulled up to 87 Marlborough Street, Maya's breath caught. She remembered this house, had cleaned it for 6 months, knew every corner. The brownstone facade looked the same. Elegant federal-style architecture from the 1890s, black shutters against warm brick. The kind of understated wealth that didn't need to announce itself. But returning now not as an employee, but as, what? Guest? Charity case? Mother of the owner's children? The role was undefined and terrifying. Elena was already there, having taken a separate car. She'd prepared the guest suite on the second floor, the one with the adjoining nursery that Lucas had commissioned years ago for eventual children, but never used because he'd believed himself incapable of fathering any. The irony sat in Maya's throat like something sharp. Lucas carried Sophie up the stairs. She'd woken briefly when he lifted her, said, "Carry me?" with sleep-soft trust, then gone limp in his arms, in the way children do when they feel safe. Maya carried Emma, who was heavier, dead weight, with exhaustion. They climbed the curved staircase in silence, their footsteps muffled by carpet that felt like walking on clouds after months of shelter linoleum. The guest suite was enormous by Maya's current standards. A king bed with actual pillows, she'd been using rolled-up clothes, dominated one wall. An attached bathroom promised a tub, real water pressure, the luxury of washing without timing herself. And through an open door, the nursery. 2 cribs already made up with fresh linens, a rocking chair positioned between them, soft lamplight, making everything look like a photograph from a magazine about lives Maya had only ever observed from the outside. Elena prepared this, Lucas explained, seeing Maya's overwhelmed expression. There are clothes in the dresser. My housekeeper has grandchildren. She donated some things. Diapers, wipes, everything you need for tonight. Tomorrow we can... He stopped himself, realizing he was making plans for someone else's life again. Tomorrow you can decide what you want to do. Maya nodded numbly, her throat too tight for words. The twins were heavy in her arms, both deeply asleep now with that absolute surrender that only children could achieve. Lucas gently placed Sophie in one crib, and Maya laid Emma in the other, tucking the blanket around her small body with the automatic precision of 3 years' practice. For a moment, they stood side by side, looking at their sleeping daughters. The nursery smelled like lavender and new cotton, nothing like the mildew and disinfectant scent of shelter sleeping rooms. Through the window, Beacon Hill spread out below them, historic street lamps casting gold pools on brick sidewalks, the kind of neighborhood where people walked their dogs at midnight without fear. "They're beautiful," Lucas whispered, his voice rough with emotion he wasn't trying to hide. "They look just like you." "No," Maya said quietly. "They look like you. Sophie has your stubborn chin. Emma has your way of frowning in her sleep like she's solving problems even in dreams. They have your kindness. I can see it in how completely they trust you. The moment stretched, fragile as spun sugar. Maya should leave, let him go, maintain the boundaries that would protect her heart. But 3 years of exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and she heard herself ask, "Why did you never marry Victoria?" Lucas was quiet for so long that Maya thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. "Because she wasn't you." Maya's breath caught. "I know that's not fair to say," Lucas continued, still looking at the twins rather than at her. "I know I have no right, but you asked, and I'm tired of lying. I agreed to the engagement because my board wanted stability, because Victoria was suitable, because I thought I couldn't have children anyway, so what did it matter who I spent my life with? But I never signed the marriage license. I kept postponing, finding excuses. And deep down, I think I always knew I was waiting for you to come back, and I didn't leave because I wanted to." Maya's voice cracked, and suddenly the dam broke. 3 years of held-back words flooding out. "I left because Victoria made me believe I was nothing, that you'd think I was trying to trap you, that I was disposable. You were never disposable." Lucas finally turned to look at her, and the raw honesty in his face made Maya's chest ache. "You were the person who made my house feel like home. Do you know how rare that is? I spent my childhood being shuffled between foster homes where I was just another mouth to feed, another obligation. But when you were here, reading in the library or humming while you worked, I finally understood what home meant. And then you were gone, and the house was just a building again." Maya was crying now, silent tears she couldn't control. "I thought you didn't even notice I left." "I noticed." Lucas's voice cracked. "I noticed every single day." A knock interrupted them. Elena, with towels and a tray of food. She set everything down quietly, read the emotion saturating the room like humidity, and left without a word, pulling the door closed behind her with a soft click. Maya looked at the food, real food, a sandwich and fruit and soup still steaming, and realized how hungry she was, how long it had been since she'd eaten anything beyond vending machine crackers. Lucas saw her hesitation and said gently, "Eat, please. I'll stay with the girls if you want to shower, or sleep, or just breathe. Why are you being so kind?" The question came out broken, confused. "Because you deserved kindness 3 years ago and didn't get it." Lucas's jaw tightened. "I can't fix what happened, but I can give you one night where you don't have to be afraid or alone." Maya ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Then she showered, the hot water a luxury she'd forgotten existed, washing away 14 hours of airport grime and 3 years of accumulated exhaustion. When she finally collapsed into the enormous bed, every muscle in her body seemed to sigh with relief. Through the open door, she could see Lucas in the rocking chair between the cribs, watching Sophie and Emma sleep, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the nightlight. He looked like a man trying to memorize something he was afraid of losing. Around 3 a.m., his phone rang. Once, twice, and 3 times. On the fourth call, he answered, his voice low. "Victoria, we'll talk in the morning, at my office, 10 a.m. He hung up without waiting for a response. Maya closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. She was too aware of where she was, of how temporary the safety felt, of how quickly everything could be taken away. In the nursery, Sophie woke first as dawn started painting the windows gray. She sat up in her crib, saw Lucas in the chair, and instead of crying for Maya, her default, her anchor, she reached through the bars toward him. "Dada." The word was soft, questioning but unmistakable. Lucas froze. Then he crossed to her crib and lifted her out, holding her against his chest like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Yes," he whispered. "I'm your Dada." From the bedroom doorway, Maya watched them, this billionaire CEO and her daughter, connected by blood and now by choice, and felt her heart breaking and healing at the same time. Grant Innovations headquarters, 22nd floor, 10 a.m. Lucas hadn't slept. After Sophie fell back asleep calling him Dada, he'd sat with his daughters until sunrise, painted the nursery windows gold, then showered and dressed for what he knew would be one of the hardest conversations of his life. He'd left Maya and the twins at the manor with Elena, who'd promised to make them breakfast, real breakfast, not vending machine pastries, and ensure they felt safe. Now he sat in his corner office on the 22nd floor, surrounded by the trappings of success he'd spent 15 years building, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, where container ships moved like chess pieces across gray water. The custom mahogany desk his board had given him when Grant Innovations went public, framed patents on the walls, 17 of them, each representing a diagnostic algorithm that had saved countless lives. But none of it mattered, not compared to the memory of Sophie's small hand wrapped around his finger, Emma's sleepy smile when she'd woken at dawn, Maya's tears as she'd finally told him what Victoria had done. Victoria arrived exactly at 10, dressed for battle in Chanel armor, a black suit with military-precise tailoring, heels that added 3 inches and doubled as weapons. She dismissed Lucas's new temporary assistant with a look that could freeze water and closed the door behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like a threat. "Darling." Her smile was porcelain perfect, not reaching her eyes. "David told me the most absurd story before I had him sign an NDA to prevent further damage. He said you found your former maid at the airport with 2 children, that you took them home, that you fired him for what, exactly? Doing his job." Lucas didn't rise from his desk. The morning light streaming through the windows behind him put his face in shadow, a deliberate power play he'd learned in boardroom negotiations. "Sit down, Victoria." "I prefer to stand." "I wasn't asking." His voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent the night realizing exactly how much of his life had been constructed on lies, how much he'd been manipulated by someone he'd trusted. "Sit down." Victoria sat, but her posture screamed defiance. Spine straight, chin elevated, hands folded in her lap with the controlled grace of someone who'd been taught since childhood that appearance was everything, that vulnerability was weakness. Lucas opened his laptop, turned it to face her. On screen, the photo of Maya's letter, the bank receipt for $5,000, the NDA with Victoria's signature, evidence arranged like a prosecution exhibit. "Tell me," Lucas said, his voice carrying the dangerous quiet that preceded storms. "What gave you the right to intercept a message meant for me? To pay off the mother of my children? To threaten her with legal action if she contacted me?" Victoria's face went carefully blank. That mask she'd perfected over years of hiding her family's financial collapse, of pretending old money still meant liquid assets rather than mounting debt. "I was protecting you. Protecting me." "Lucas, think about it rationally." She leaned forward, deploying the reasonable tone she used in board meetings when trying to sway votes. "A maid claims she's pregnant with your baby right after you receive a diagnosis saying you're infertile. It was obviously a scam. She wanted money. I gave her what she wanted and removed the problem. You should be thanking me." Lucas stood slowly, his hands flat on the desk to keep them from shaking with rage. "Those claims are sleeping in my house right now. 2 beautiful little girls who look exactly like me, who have my DNA running through their veins, who have spent 2.5 years without their father because you decided to play God with other people's lives." Victoria's composure cracked slightly, a muscle jumping in her jaw, her fingers tightening on the armrest. "You don't know they're yours. Get a paternity test." "I don't need a test." Lucas moved to the windows, couldn't look at her anymore. Outside, the harbor stretched toward the Atlantic, vast and indifferent to human drama. "I know, I see myself in their faces. But even if I didn't, even if science somehow proved otherwise, it wouldn't matter. They're my daughters. Maya is their mother. That's family." "Family?" Victoria's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "Lucas, you're being emotional. That woman worked for you. She cleaned your toilets. She read medical journals during her breaks," Lucas interrupted, whirling to face her. "She brewed ginger tea for me after late nights. She made my house feel like home, for the first time since I aged out of foster care. And you destroyed that. You destroyed her. You let my children grow up in shelters because you couldn't stand the idea that I might be happy with someone real instead of performing happiness with you." Victoria stood, abandoning pretense. "Fair?" Her voice rose, control slipping. "You want to know why I intercepted that letter? Because I knew that if you found out, you'd choose her. A nobody with no education, no connections, no understanding of your world. You'd throw away everything we built for some romantic fantasy about the help having your secret babies." We didn't build anything," Lucas said coldly. "You manipulated me. There's a difference. I saved you. From scandal, from exploitation, from making the biggest mistake of your life. From being happy?" Lucas's voice broke slightly. "Because that's what you really couldn't stand, isn't it? The idea that I could be genuinely happy with someone who wasn't you. Someone who didn't need my money, or my name, or the doors I could open. Someone who just saw me." Victoria's mask shattered completely, her face contorted with rage, and something that looked almost like grief. "You think she loves you? She wants your money, Lucas, just like everyone does. The only difference is I'm honest about what this relationship is. A business arrangement that benefits us both." "No," Lucas said quietly. "The difference is Maya never asked me for a single thing, while you've spent 3 years draining my accounts for your father's gambling debts." Victoria went absolutely still. "How did you—" "I'm a billionaire, Victoria." Lucas's smile was cold enough to frost glass. "You think I don't have people who monitor unusual expenditures? $1.2 million in the past. 18 months, funneled through various accounts to cover Reginald Ashford's casino markers. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" The color drained from Victoria's face, leaving her makeup garish against pale skin. "My father was sick," she whispered. And for the first time, Lucas heard something genuine in her voice. Terror, shame, the desperation of someone who'd been treading water so long she'd forgotten how to swim. The gambling was, I couldn't let him die disgraced. I couldn't let everyone know the Ashford fortune was gone. I would have been nothing, Lucas finished. You would have been exactly what Maya was, a human being without money. And you couldn't stand it. So you made yourself indispensable to me, made sure I believed I needed you, while destroying the one person who might have actually loved me for who I was, rather than what I could provide. Victoria straightened, rebuilding her armor piece by piece. Fine. You want to be noble? Play house with your maid and her children? Go ahead. But when this blows up, when she shows her true colors and demands millions in child support, when the press tears you apart, when your board questions your judgment, don't come crying to me. Get out, Lucas said. The engagement is over. Legal will contact you about returning the ring and finalizing a settlement. You'll get enough to maintain yourself, but not enough to maintain your lies. Learn to live with who you actually are. Victoria. It might be the first honest thing you've ever done. Victoria left without another word, but her heels on marble sounded like gunshots echoing through the executive suite. Lucas slumped into his chair, realized his hands were shaking. His phone rang almost immediately. Elena. Mr. Grant, you need to come home, now. His blood ran cold. What's wrong? Are the girls? The girls are fine, Elena said quickly, but Maya is gone. Various Boston locations, 11:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Lucas had rarely felt powerless in his adult life. Money, influence, intelligence, these had always been his tools to solve problems, to bend reality toward desired outcomes. But how do you find someone who doesn't want to be found in a city of 700,000 people? Someone who'd spent 3 years learning to disappear? Elena met him at Grant Manor, with addresses pulled up on her phone. They stood in the foyer where Maya had once polished the marble floors, where she'd hummed while arranging flowers, where she'd existed in his peripheral vision until she'd become central to everything. Maya's sister Carla lives in Dorchester, Elena said, but she's still hospitalized from the apartment fire. Maya wouldn't go there. Too obvious, and there's no space anyway. She has one friend from the shelter system, Rosa Martinez, who works at a laundromat in Roxbury. That's where I'd start. Lucas drove himself through the city, refusing Robert's offer of the company car. This was too personal, too raw for the buffer of a driver. Boston mid-morning was a symphony of impatience. Construction crews tearing up Boylston Street, tourists blocking sidewalks near Faneuil Hall, delivery trucks double-parked with hazards blinking their mechanical apologies. The city smelled like exhaust and roasted peanuts from street vendors, that particular urban perfume that existed nowhere else. The laundromat sat on a Roxbury corner where gentrification met resistance. A bodega with hand-painted signs beside an artisanal coffee shop, chain-link fences surrounding vacant lots that real estate developers circled like sharks. The laundromat itself was small, steamy, filled with the smell of detergent and damp clothes, the rhythmic thunder of industrial dryers, providing bass notes to Spanish radio playing from a paint-splattered boombox. Rosa Martinez looked up when Lucas entered in his three-piece suit. Brooks Brothers, tailored, probably worth more than a month's rent for most people in this neighborhood. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the suspicious protective instincts of someone who'd seen too many people hurt by those with power. I'm looking for Maya, Lucas said without preamble, his voice raw from an hour of searching. And my daughters. Your daughters. Rosa repeated it with acid skepticism, setting down the towel she'd been folding with precise, angry movements. The same daughters you didn't know existed until yesterday, the same daughters Maya raised alone in shelters while you played businessman. Lucas absorbed the hit because he deserved it. Every word was justified. You're right. I didn't know, but I know now, and I need to find them. Please. Why? So you can take them? Rich men like you always take what you want. So I can apologize. Lucas interrupted. And something in his voice must have sounded genuine, because Rosa paused, reassessing. So I can tell Maya she doesn't have to run. So I can be a father to Sophie and Emma instead of a stranger. They'll learn about in stories their mother tells them when they ask why they don't have a dad. Rosa studied him for a long moment, her hands still on the folded towel, steam rising around her from the nearby dryers like she was an oracle delivering judgment through mist. She's not here, but you know where she is. Maybe. Please. Lucas's voice cracked, professional composure dissolving. I know I have no right to ask, but those little girls deserve better than sleeping in airports, better than having their mother terrified and exhausted every minute of every day. If you care about Maya, and I can see you do, help me help her. Rosa sighed, the sound of someone making a decision that might be wrong but felt necessary. There's a women's shelter in Roxbury, St. Augustine's. Maya volunteered there before the twins were born, back when she was still trying to finish her community college classes. The director, Sister Margaret, she might take Maya in, but Lucas Grant, she used his first name like a weapon, like a promise. If you hurt that girl again, if you try to take those babies away from her, I will personally make your life hell, rich or not. You understand me? I understand, Lucas said, and meant it. St. Augustine's occupied a converted church building with peeling white paint and a parking lot filled with potholes that could swallow a tire. The surrounding neighborhood was tired. Triple-deckers with sagging porches, corner stores with bulletproof glass, the visual vocabulary of disinvestment. But inside the shelter, everything was clean, orderly, infused with the kind of fierce dignity that comes from people refusing to let poverty define them. Sister Margaret met him at the door, a woman in her 70s with steel gray hair and eyes that had witnessed too much human suffering to be impressed by expensive suits or corporate credentials. She's here, Sister Margaret said, without making Lucas ask, without pretending not to know why he'd come. But she doesn't want to see you. I need to explain. Mr. Grant, Maya has spent 3 years learning that powerful men can't be trusted. You showing up here in your luxury car, she gestured toward his Audi parked at the curb, proves her point. Lucas felt the truth of this like physical impact. What do I do? Sister Margaret considered him with the assessing gaze of someone who'd spent decades separating genuine repentance from performance. You want to prove you're different? Then do the hard work. Don't demand access to your children because they're biologically yours. Earn the right to be in their lives. Earn Maya's trust instead of expecting it as your due. How? Start by giving her what she actually needs. Not money, she won't accept that yet. Not without feeling like she's being bought. Give her time, space, stability without conditions attached. An idea formed, crystallizing with the clarity that came from finally understanding what mattered. Lucas pulled out his phone, made a call. Emily, it's Lucas Grant. Remember that property we discussed last year, the brownstone in South End you converted to apartments? Is the ground floor unit still vacant? He listened, nodded. I want to lease it, long-term, furnished. Available immediately. 2 bedrooms, safe neighborhood, near public transit and schools. Another pause. Set it up under the Grant Innovations corporate housing account. It's for a friend who needs a stable place to raise her family. He hung up, looked at Sister Margaret. There's an apartment available. Safe building, good neighborhood. It's paid for, 1 year up front. It's Maya's, no strings, no conditions. She can stay as long as she wants. If she never wants to see me again, that's her choice. But at least Sophie and Emma will have a home. Sister Margaret's expression softened fractionally. You really care about her. I always did. I was just too much of a coward to admit it when it mattered. Wait here. Time became elastic. 10 minutes that felt like hours. Lucas counted the cracks in the ceiling, studied the bulletin board filled with job postings and recovery meeting schedules, prayed to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. Finally, Sister Margaret returned. Behind her, Maya holding both twins, her face a mixture of exhaustion and fierce protective defiance that made Lucas's chest ache. Maya, Lucas began. Don't, she said, voice sharp as breaking ice. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't try to fix everything with money. Just tell me the truth. What do you want from us? Before Lucas could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw your little family reunion on the news. Victoria's already spinning this to the press. Boston's most eligible bachelor's secret. Scandal. Gold-digging maid claims billionaire fathered her children. Story breaks in 20 minutes. Thought you should know. A friend. Lucas's face drained of color. Maya saw his expression change. Watched him read something that made his jaw clench. What is it? She asked. But she already knew. Whatever fragile piece they'd found was about to be destroyed. Again. Tell me, she demanded. Lucas turned his phone screen toward her. The headline was already going live on Boston media websites. Breaking, tech billionaire Lucas Grant's secret children with former housemaid. Exclusive story. Below it, Victoria's official statement painting Maya as an opportunist, the twins as a scandal, their entire existence as something shameful that needed explaining. The twins would be photographed, analyzed, judged. Maya's worst nightmare was coming true in real time. St. Augustine's shelter to Grant Manor, 4:45 p.m. to 9 p.m. The media firestorm erupted faster than Lucas had anticipated, within 30 minutes of Victoria's statement going live. His phone became a weapon of harassment. Board members demanding explanations, PR teams asking for official responses, reporters somehow obtaining his private number and calling with questions designed to wound. Mr. Grant, did you know the children existed? Is this why you never married Miss Ashford? How much are you paying Miss Rodriguez to stay quiet? But Lucas wasn't thinking about damage control or corporate strategy or any of the mechanisms he'd spent 15 years perfecting. He was thinking about Maya's face when she'd seen the headline, the way all color had drained from her cheeks, how her arms had tightened around Sophie and Emma, with the protective instinct of an animal sensing predators closing in. "We need to leave," Maya said, already backing toward the shelter's exit, her voice rising with the particular panic of someone who'd spent years learning that visibility meant danger. "Before they find us here. Before photographers start camping outside, they'll find you anywhere in Boston," Lucas said quietly, moving to block her path, not with force but with presence. Victoria made sure of that. She gave them enough details to track you, your name, the twins' ages, probably even described what you were wearing at the airport. "Running will only make it worse. And staying with you makes it better?" Maya's voice cracked, raw with 3 years of accumulated fear. "Lucas, look at that article. They're calling me a gold digger, a schemer, someone who trapped you. They're saying Sophie and Emma are—" Her voice broke completely. She couldn't say the words illegitimate or scandal out loud while holding her daughters, couldn't poison the air they breathed with such ugliness. Sister Margaret intervened with the gentle authority of someone who'd spent 43 years navigating crises in a shelter system designed to break people down. "Mr. Grant is right, Maya. The moment you run, you look guilty, and those babies will spend their lives with this shadow over them, not because of anything you did, but because of how it appears." Lucas stepped forward carefully, the way he'd learned to approach wounded things. "Let me fix this. Please. I know I have no right to ask, but—" "You're right," Maya cut him off, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You don't have the right, but they do." And she looked down at Sophie and Emma, who were confused by their mother's distress, by the tension crackling through the room like static electricity before a storm. "What do you want me to do?" "Come with me, back to Grant Manor. We hold a press conference. Together. We tell the truth, that you worked for me 3 years ago, that we had a relationship, that you tried to contact me when you discovered you were pregnant, but were deliberately prevented from doing so. We don't hide. We don't apologize for Sophie and Emma existing. We make it clear they're my daughters, and I'm claiming them publicly. That makes me look like a woman who was in an impossible situation and did the best she could." "Which is the truth." Lucas's voice steadied, finding certainty. "Victoria is spinning this as scandal because she wants you to look weak, opportunistic. The only way to fight that is to stand beside me and show everyone you're not ashamed, because you have nothing to be ashamed of." Maya laughed, bitter and broken. Says the billionaire, "Lucas, I cleaned your toilets, I slept in your servants' quarters, and now I'm supposed to stand next to you in front of cameras and pretend we're, what, a family? We are a family." The words came out fierce, undeniable, carrying weight that made the shelter's walls seem to lean in and listen. Maybe not in conventional ways, maybe not in ways that make sense to anyone else, but Sophie and Emma are my daughters. You're their mother, that's family, that's everything that matters. Sister Margaret touched Maya's shoulder with aged, work-worn hands. "Child, I've worked in shelters for 43 years. I've seen every kind of situation you can imagine. This man is offering you something rare, public acknowledgement. Most men in his position would pay you to disappear, quietly, would send lawyers with NDAs and threats. He's asking you to stand with him. That takes courage, from both of you." Maya looked at her daughters. Sophie was sucking her thumb, a habit she'd developed during particularly stressful times in the shelters. Emma was watching Lucas with curious, intelligent eyes, his eyes, inherited through blood, and now focused on him, with the assessment of a child deciding whether to trust. "If I do this," Maya said slowly, each word costing her, "I need promises, real ones, not the kind rich people make when they want something and forget when it becomes inconvenient." "Name them." First, no custody battle, ever. I'm their mother. You don't get to take them from me because you can afford better lawyers, because your house is bigger, because you can give them things I can't." "Agreed," Lucas said immediately, without hesitation. "I don't want to take them. I want to be part of their lives. With your permission, not in spite of your resistance." "Second, no money. I don't want your money, your charity, your guilt payments. I'll accept temporary housing until I can get back on my feet, but I'm not your dependent. I'm not your kept woman." Lucas flinched at the phrase but nodded. "Understood. Though I will be paying child support, that's not negotiable. They're my daughters. I support them financially. That's not about you. It's about them. That's about me being their father, doing what fathers do." Maya wanted to argue but couldn't find grounds to stand on. The logic was sound. "Fine. Child support. Nothing else. Third, you don't get to control my life. I'm not your employee anymore. If we're doing this, co-parenting or whatever term people use, we do it as equals. Not as billionaire and former maid, not as rich and poor, as two people who made these children and owe them better than our mistakes. Lucas held her gaze. Maya, I never saw you as just a maid. I saw you as someone who made my house feel like home. As someone who read medical journals during breaks because you were brilliant and curious and wanted more than what life had given you. As someone who showed me more genuine kindness than anyone in my so-called social circle ever did. You were never beneath me. I was just too blind, too scared to see that you were exactly what I needed. The words hung in the air between them, suspended in the shelter's fluorescent light. Emma broke the tension by reaching for Lucas, saying with perfect clarity, "Dada?" Lucas looked at Maya, silently asking permission that he'd learned he needed to request rather than assume. She nodded, just barely, permission granted through exhaustion and hope in equal measure. He took Sophie in one arm, and Emma climbed onto his other arm with the confidence of a child who'd already decided to trust. The weight of them, 5 pounds each at birth, now solid and real and alive in his arms, made something crack open in his chest. "Okay," Maya whispered. "We'll do the press conference, but Lucas, if this goes wrong, if they hurt my girls—" "They won't," Lucas said, though he couldn't promise that, couldn't control what the world would do. "Because I'm going to make sure everyone understands. Anyone who comes after you or Sophie or Emma comes after me. And I didn't build a billion-dollar company by letting people destroy what matters to me." Sister Margaret pulled Maya aside. "There's something you should know. 3 years ago, when you were 7 months pregnant and terrified, a woman came here looking for you. Offered the shelter $50,000 to tell her where you'd gone. I refused, but she left me with a threat, said if you ever contacted Lucas, she had evidence that you'd stolen from his home. Jewelry, specifically. A diamond necklace worth $200,000. Maya's blood turned to ice. I would never, I know, child. But Victoria Ashford was building insurance, a criminal accusation, ready to destroy your credibility if you ever came back." Lucas overhead, and his face went deadly calm. "She was going to frame you." "She already did, in a way," Sister Margaret said. The threat was enough to keep Maya running. Maya felt the room tilt. Victoria hadn't just paid her off. She'd built a cage of potential accusations, had made Maya believe that returning meant facing criminal charges she couldn't afford to defend against. Lucas pulled out his phone, made a rapid call to Elena. "The Cartier necklace in the master bedroom safe. Photograph it. Check the security logs. Prove it never went anywhere. Victoria's planning to claim Maya stole it, and we're going to prove she's lying before she can deploy that lie." As they prepared to leave St. Augustine's, Robert bringing a car with tinted windows, a photographer emerged from behind a parked van, camera already clicking with mechanical hunger. "Mr. Grant, is it true you have illegitimate children?" "Maya Rodriguez, are you demanding money? How much is he paying you? To stay quiet?" The questions were rapid-fire, cruel, designed to wound. Sophie started crying, frightened by the shouting. Lucas shielded the twins with his body, but Maya saw something shift in his face. From gentle to absolutely lethal. "Get in the car," he told Maya. Then to the photographer, voice carrying the promise of destruction, "Print one word that hurts these children, and I'll sue your publication into bankruptcy. That's not a threat, that's a promise." The photographer kept clicking. Lucas realized this was war now, and Victoria had already fired the first shot. Grant Manor, War Room, 9 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Grant Manor had transformed into a crisis management headquarters. Lucas's study, normally a sanctuary of leather-bound books and mahogany furniture that smelled like old paper and expensive whiskey, now hummed with the controlled chaos of battle preparation. Legal team, PR specialist, and Patricia Chen, a grandmother of 5 and Lucas's most trusted board member, worked with the focused intensity of surgeons performing triage. Maya sat in a wingback chair near the window, overwhelmed by the machinery of wealth mobilizing around her. Through the study's French doors, she could see Elena in the adjacent playroom, keeping Sophie and Emma entertained with picture books and soft toys. Every decision being made in this room affected her life, reshaped her future, determined whether her daughters would grow up as scandals or as simply children. But the difference from every other time powerful people had made decisions about her was this. Lucas kept turning to her, asking with genuine deference, "Is this okay with you? Do you approve this statement? What are you comfortable with?" It was foreign, disorienting. Men like Lucas didn't usually ask. Patricia Chen reviewed Victoria's statement to the press, reading aloud with the disgusted precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence. "Miss Rodriguez worked in Mr. Grant's household briefly 3 years ago and left without notice. Her current claims are opportunistic and timed to coincide with Mr. Grant's upcoming nuptials. We believe proper paternity testing will resolve this matter." Patricia looked up, her face carved from granite in contempt. This woman is a viper. She's also desperate, Lucas said from where he stood at his desk, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie abandoned somewhere around hour 2. Which makes her dangerous. We need to move faster than she can react. Michael Torres, head legal counsel, spread documents across the conference table Lucas had brought in from the boardroom. Here's what we have. Elena's testimony about the intercepted letter and the coercive NDA. Bank records showing Victoria's $5,000 payment to Maya with staff settlement in the memo line, which implies wrongdoing on Maya's part. Records of Victoria borrowing $1.2 million from company discretionary funds to cover her father's gambling debts. And what? He pulled out a medical folder with the gravity of someone handling evidence. Hospital records from Boston Medical Center confirming Sophie and Emma Grant were born May 3rd with genetic markers consistent with your medical records on file from your executive physical. You pulled my medical records? Lucas looked surprised. You authorized comprehensive executive physicals through company insurance. The records were already accessible with proper clearance, and Lucas, Michael's voice softened with something approaching gentleness. The doctors who said you were infertile. They weren't entirely wrong, but they were incomplete. Your sperm count was severely low, but not zero. It would require perfect timing, perfect circumstances, the biological equivalent of lightning striking. But it was never actually impossible. But Lucas felt something crack open inside his chest. 3 years of believing he was broken, of mourning the family he thought he'd never have, of agreeing to marry Victoria because what did it matter if he couldn't be a father anyway? All of it built on a diagnosis that had been probabilistic, not absolute. We need to address the stolen jewelry accusation Victoria is planning, Patricia said, pulling them back to strategy. Sister Margaret's testimony tells us Victoria has a backup plan if the DNA evidence works against her. And Maya looked up, confused and frightened. What jewelry? Lucas explained what Sister Margaret had revealed. Victoria's threat about the diamond necklace, the insurance policy to destroy Maya's credibility if she ever came back. Maya's face went white as bone. Lucas, I know. Lucas crossed to her, crouched down so they were eye level. But we need to prove it conclusively. Elena, the night Maya left, was there a diamond necklace in the master bedroom safe? Elena nodded from the doorway. The Cartier piece, $200,000, purchased by your mother's estate before she died. It's still there. I photographed it an hour ago with today's newspaper, visible in the frame for timestamp verification. And the security logs? Show the safe was accessed only by you and authorized household staff, never by Maya. The code was never given to her. She had no way to access it even if she'd wanted to. So if Victoria claims Maya stole it, Michael said, connecting pieces, we prove the necklace never went anywhere, that Maya never had access, and that Victoria fabricated the entire accusation as leverage. The team worked with surgical precision. Press release drafted with careful language that told truth without sensationalism. Legal letters prepared for every media outlet that had published defamatory content, promising litigation if they didn't print retractions. Character references gathered, Elena's testimony, Sister Margaret's statement, Rosa Martinez's fierce defense, even Maya's old professors from community college who remembered her as brilliant, dedicated, someone who took online classes between overnight cleaning shifts because she refused to give up on education. At 10:30, Maya finally spoke up, her voice cutting through the strategic planning. This is too much. You're risking your reputation, your company, your standing for my family, Lucas interrupted, and the room went quiet. Maya, my reputation was built on innovation and integrity. If I can't stand up for the mother of my children, if I let people destroy you to protect my image, then I never had integrity to begin with. I was just performing it. Patricia Chin added with the blunt warmth of a grandmother who'd seen too much corporate cowardice. Dear, I've been in boardrooms with Lucas for 8 years. I've never seen him this certain about anything. Let the man do the right thing. Maya looked at Lucas, really looked at him. He was exhausted, hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly, a coffee stain on his shirt from when he'd gestured too emphatically during a strategy session. He'd spent the entire day trying to fix what Victoria had broken, and he hadn't once blamed Maya for the chaos. Hadn't once suggested this would be easier if she just disappeared again. Why? She asked softly, the question carrying 3 years of confusion. Why are you doing all this? Lucas crossed to her, crouched down again, that gesture of making himself smaller, of meeting her as an equal rather than looking down. Because 3 years ago, I was too scared to tell you how I felt, too worried about power dynamics and social expectations and what my board would think. And that cowardice cost us 3 years, cost Sophie and Emma their father. Cost you your peace and your safety. I can't get those years back. But I can make damn sure that from this moment forward, everyone knows You and our daughters are under my protection. And anyone who tries to hurt you goes through me first. Maya's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I don't need protection. I need a partner, Lucas finished. I know, and I'm going to prove I can be that, starting tomorrow. In the playroom, Sophie started crying. Overtired, overstimulated, past the point where comfort came easily. Maya rose to go to her, but Lucas touched her arm gently. Let me, please. I have 3 years of bedtimes to make up for. He went to the playroom, and Maya watched through the doorway as this billionaire CEO, this man who commanded board meetings and negotiated billion-dollar deals, picked up her crying daughter, and somehow, miraculously got her to calm down. He was singing something off-key and soft, and Sophie's tears slowed, then stopped, then transformed into a tiny hiccup laugh. He's a good man, Patricia observed quietly. Stubborn as hell, but good. I'm starting to see that, Maya admitted. At 11:15, Lucas's phone rang. Block number. He answered on speaker with the team listening. Victoria's voice, tight, with controlled rage, barely masking desperation. You think you've won? You think a press conference and some documents will fix this? Lucas, I have something you don't know about. Something that will destroy any credibility she has. If you go through with this, if you humiliate me publicly, I'll release it, and you'll both regret it. She hung up before he could respond. The room exchanged glances. What else did Victoria have? What final card was she holding? Boston Press Club, downtown, 2 p.m. The press conference room was packed to capacity with the particular energy of journalists who smelled blood in the water. Every major Boston outlet, regional news networks, even national media had sent representatives, their cameras forming a technological firing squad at the back of the room. The space smelled like coffee gone cold in predatory anticipation, that particular scent of scandal about to be dissected for public consumption. Maya stood backstage in a borrowed outfit Patricia Chen had helped her choose. Simple navy dress, nothing that could be read as trying too hard, or gold digger cosplay, as Patricia had called it with dark humor. Through the curtain gap, Maya could see the press corps assembling like an army preparing for battle. Her hands were shaking. Sophie and Emma were in an adjacent room with Elena, watching on a monitor, because Lucas had refused to parade them in front of cameras, like evidence to be examined. They're children, not props, he'd said with finality that ended all discussion. Victoria sat in the third row, dressed in morning black. Her father's death, 2 months ago, suddenly relevant again. Weaponized grief. Her face was serene, confident, the expression of someone holding cards she believed were trumps. She'd arrived early, positioned herself where cameras would catch her reactions, where her presence would remind everyone. I was here first. I am the legitimate relationship. This other woman is the interloper. Lucas found Maya backstage, took her trembling hands in his. You don't have to do this. We can... Yes, I do, Maya interrupted. For them. So, Sophie and Emma grow up knowing their mother didn't hide. At precisely 2 p.m., they walked out together. Lucas stood at the podium, Maya beside him, and the camera flashes created a strobe effect that made reality feel fragmented, disconnected. Lucas began without preamble, his voice carrying the weight of confession. Thank you for coming. I'm going to make a statement, present evidence, then answer questions. First, Maya Rodriguez worked in my home 3 years ago. During that time, we developed feelings for each other. Those feelings led to a brief relationship. When Maya became pregnant, she attempted to contact me, but was prevented from doing so by parties acting on behalf of someone close to me. The room erupted. Murmurs, camera shutters, the rustle of reporters checking their recorders were running. Maya gave birth to twin daughters, Sophie and Emma, on May 3rd, 2.5 years ago. They are my biological children. I did not know of their existence until 2 days ago, when I encountered Maya and my daughters at Logan International Airport. The reason I didn't know is because Maya was paid to disappear and threatened with legal action if she contacted me. Michael Torres began distributing packets to the press, copies of Maya's letter, the bank receipt showing Victoria's payment, the NDA, testimony from Elena and sister Margaret, hospital records confirming the twins' birth, and genetic markers. A reporter jumped up immediately. Mr. Grant, are you alleging Victoria Ashford deliberately kept you from your children? I'm not alleging. I'm stating documented fact. Victoria rose slowly, her movement calculated for maximum dramatic effect. Lucas, this is absurd. I was protecting you from a woman who... Who what? Lucas cut her off, voice sharp as shattered glass. Who loved me? Who carried my children alone while sleeping in shelters? Who tried to survive on $5,000 while you were spending $1.2 million of company funds on your father's gambling debts? The room detonated. Victoria's face drained of color. Cameras swiveled toward her like predators sensing weakness. That's a private matter, Victoria attempted. It's embezzlement, Michael Torres interjected calmly, holding up documentation. We have records of unauthorized transfers from Grant Innovations discretionary funds to offshore accounts linked to Reginald Ashford's casino markers. Miss Ashford has been under internal investigation for 3 months. Lucas continued, relentless now. You want to know why I never married you, Victoria? Because something always felt wrong, and when Maya disappeared, you made sure I believed she'd abandoned me. The one thing you knew would hurt me most because I told you about being left at a bus station at age 4. You weaponized my childhood trauma to keep me from finding the truth. Victoria's composure cracked like porcelain under pressure. You're humiliating me because of some maid? Don't. Maya's voice, quiet but firm, cut through the chaos. She stepped to the microphone, and the room went silent. Don't call me some maid, as if that makes me less human. I cleaned Mr. Grant's home. I prepared his meals. That was honest work, and I'm not ashamed of it. What I am ashamed of is believing that I was too small, too unimportant to deserve honesty and dignity. Her voice gained strength, 3 years of silence breaking like a dam. Miss Ashford told me, Mr. Grant would never believe me, that I was nothing, that my children would be better off never knowing their father than knowing they were mistakes. She gave me $5,000 and an NDA that terrified me because I didn't have a lawyer to explain it, was manipulative and probably unenforceable. And I ran because I believed her. Because I'd spent my whole life being told people like me don't get second chances. Lucas took her hand, the gesture simple but captured by every camera. This billionaire and former housekeeper standing together as equals. But here's what Miss Ashford didn't count on, Maya continued. She didn't count on Sophie and Emma being strong, beautiful girls who deserved to know their father. She didn't count on Elena Rodriguez risking her job to leave me care packages for 3 years. She didn't count on Sister Margaret refusing $50,000 to betray me. And she definitely didn't count on Lucas Grant being a better man than she believed possible. A veteran reporter in the front row raised her hand. Mr. Grant, what about paternity testing? Will you be confirming DNA? No. The room buzzed. I don't need DNA confirmation. I know they're mine. But more importantly, even if science somehow proved otherwise, it wouldn't matter. I'm choosing to be their father. I'm choosing this family. Choice is what matters. Victoria had heard enough. She stood, voice shaking with rage, barely contained. You're throwing away everything for her. Your reputation, your standing, my chance at happiness? Lucas finished. Yes, gladly. Because here's what you never understood. I'd rather have one authentic moment with Maya and my daughters than a lifetime of performances with you. Victoria played her final card. She pulled out her phone, held it up like a weapon. You want authenticity? Fine. That night, June 15th, Lucas was scheduled to be in Singapore. I have the flight itinerary, flight records. He wasn't even in the country when she claims this happened. She's lying about everything. The accusation hung in the air. But Lucas smiled, cold, dangerous. Show the records, Victoria. Please. Elena stepped forward, tablet in hand. I'd like to present complete security footage from that night, all of it, not edited clips. 6 months later, April, Scene 1, Grant Innovations Playground. 10:30 a.m. Grant Innovations headquarters now featured something unprecedented in Boston's corporate landscape. An on-site childcare center with a rooftop playground where the Charles River stretched like silver ribbon toward the horizon. Lucas stood here during his lunch break, pushing Sophie on a swing while Emma demanded, with the imperious confidence of a 3-year-old, higher. Dada, higher. What Maya watched from a nearby bench, and something in her had unfurled over these 6 months. Like a plant finally given sunlight after years in shadow. She wore comfortable jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, a textbook for her healthcare administration course open on her lap. Lucas paid her tuition. She'd fought him on this, but he'd won by saying, "It's an investment in Sophie and Emma's future. They deserve a mother who gets to pursue her dreams. You're going to make them fearless," Maya called out, half warning, half admiration. Is that bad? Lucas caught Sophie as she launched herself from the swing with zero regard for gravity. No, Maya admitted, smiling. It's perfect. They'd settled into a rhythm that defied convention, but worked. Maya and the twins lived in the South End apartment. She now paid half the rent from her part-time position, managing Grant Innovations Community Outreach Program. Lucas had them every weekend at Grant Manor. They shared dinner 3 nights a week. It was co-parenting, but with something else hovering underneath. The possibility of more, waiting for the right moment. Scene 2, Providence, Rhode Island. 2 p.m., Victoria Ashford sat in a modest 2-bedroom apartment 60 miles from her former life, staring at financial spreadsheets for the mid-sized consulting firm where she worked. Actually worked, not just attended board meetings, but analyzed data, built client relationships, earned her salary through competence rather than connections. Her phone rang. Lucas. She almost didn't answer. Victoria, Lucas. Her voice was carefully neutral, rebuilt from months of therapy and reluctant self-examination. I wanted you to know, we're not pressing charges. The embezzlement, the obstruction, Elena and Maya convinced me to let it go. Victoria was silent for a long moment, processing grace she hadn't earned. Why? Because holding on to anger hurts us more than it hurts you. And because Sophie and Emma are teaching me that forgiveness matters more than being right. And after he hung up, Victoria sat in her small apartment and cried, not from self-pity, but because, for the first time in her adult life, she was confronting who she actually was without the armor of wealth and status. It was terrifying. But it might also be honest. Scene 3, Grant Manor Gardens, Sophie and Emma's 3rd birthday, 4 p.m. The party was modest by billionaire standards. No ponies or celebrity entertainers. Just family and friends gathered in gardens where spring had painted everything green and gold. Sister Margaret was here, and Rosa Martinez, and Maya's sister Carla, recovered and living in a rebuilt apartment funded by Lucas's anonymous donation. Sophie and Emma ran through flower beds and matching dresses they'd insisted on wearing. Their laughter, the kind of pure joy that reminded adults what happiness sounded like before the world complicated it. Lucas found Maya by the cake table, 3 tiers decorated with butterflies because Emma was obsessed with metamorphosis. Happy? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. This still feels like a dream I'm going to wake up from. It's real. He took her hand carefully, always asking permission with his touch. Maya, I know we agreed to take things slow, to focus on co-parenting, but I need to tell you something. She tensed. What? I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you since the night you stayed with me in my study when I got my diagnosis, maybe even before. And I know the power dynamics are complicated. I know you have every reason not to trust men like me, but Maya kissed him. Just leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Soft and certain and carrying 3 years of suppressed feeling. When she pulled back, she was smiling. I know, I've known for months. I was just waiting for you to be brave enough to say it. And Lucas hardly dared to breathe. And I love you too. I think I always did. I was just too afraid to admit it. They kissed again, longer this time. And somewhere in the garden, Sophie yelled with delighted disgust, Mama kissing Dada! Ew! Emma collapsed in giggles. Voiceover. Lucas. People ask me what a billionaire heart means. They think it's about money, the ability to fix problems with a checkbook. But that's not it at all. A billionaire heart is what you have when you've built something from nothing, when you know what it means to be abandoned and invisible, and you choose, consciously choose, to see the people others overlook. Maya wasn't invisible because she was poor. She was invisible because people chose not to see her. I was guilty of that too. I saw her kindness, her intelligence, her dignity, but I didn't fight for her when it mattered because I was afraid. Sophie and Emma taught me something. Wealth doesn't make you a father. Love does. Presence does. Showing up day after day, even when it's hard. I spent 15 years building a company, but I spent 2 days building a family. And the family, the messiness and fear and overwhelming love of it, that's the real fortune. A billionaire heart isn't about how much money you have. It's about how much humanity you're willing to fight for. Maya fought for our daughters alone for 3 years. That's a billionaire heart. I'm just the guy who finally woke up. The voiceover. Maya. I used to think fairy tales were for other people. People born lucky, born beautiful, born into the right circumstances. But here's what I learned. Fairy tales aren't about being rescued. They're about being seen. Lucas didn't save me. I was already saving myself. What Lucas did was choose to see me as a whole person, not a category or a class. He chose to believe me when he could have demanded DNA tests. He chose to stand beside me when he could have paid me off quietly. He chose to love Sophie and Emma as they are, not as problems to be managed. That's not a fairy tale. That's decency. But in a world that rarely offers it, decency feels magical. A billionaire heart isn't about wealth. It's about worth, recognizing the inherent worth of every person, regardless of circumstances. On the final scene, Lucas crouched as Sophie and Emma ran to him. Maya joined them, and for a moment, they stood there. 4 people who shouldn't fit together by any conventional logic, but somehow formed the perfect shape. Dada, tell story, Sophie asked. What story, sweetheart? How you find us? Lucas looked at Maya, who nodded. Well, once upon a time, there was a very foolish man who had everything but didn't know what really mattered. As his voice wove their story, the camera pulled back, showing them framed by gardens, Boston skyline glowing golden in the distance. Super. 1 year later, Lucas and Maya married in these same gardens. Sophie and Emma served as flower girls. Victoria sent a gift, a children's book about second chances with a note. I'm working on mine. Elena caught the bouquet. And at Grant Innovations, the childcare center expanded to serve 200 children of employees, regardless of position, because Lucas learned that a company isn't measured by stock price, but by how it treats the people who make it run. Final title card. A billionaire heart isn't born from wealth. It's forged in the choice to see every person as worthy, to love fiercely, to forgive generously, and to believe that second chances are the greatest fortune of all. Billionaire heart stories. A small thought to sit with. There's a particular kind of poverty that has nothing to do with bank accounts. It's the poverty of being unseen. Maya cleaned homes for years, and what wounded her most wasn't the physical labor, but the way people looked through her as if she were furniture. Lucas built a billion-dollar empire, yet felt hollow because he'd spent his childhood being treated as temporary, disposable. What transforms their story from scandal to redemption isn't money. It's the radical act of seeing each other as fully human, not as categories or transactions, but as people worthy of dignity, honesty, and choice. The billionaire heart isn't about having resources to solve every problem. It's about having the courage to recognize that some problems can't be solved with money, only with presence, with showing up, with choosing to love imperfectly but persistently. Victoria's tragedy wasn't her cruelty, it was her inability to see value in anything that couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet. She measured worth in dollars and social standing, and when those metrics failed her, she had nothing left to stand on. But Maya, who had nothing, possessed everything that mattered. The ability to love her children fiercely, to survive with grace, to believe in human goodness, even when the world gave her every reason not to. Lucas's wealth bought him time, bought him lawyers, bought him the ability to hold a press conference. But what won Maya's trust wasn't any of that. It was his willingness to be vulnerable, to admit fault, to choose family over reputation. The greatest fortune isn't what you accumulate. It's what you're willing to fight for when everything else is stripped away. Fiction disclaimer, this story is entirely a work of fiction. All characters, names, companies, locations, except for real Boston landmarks used for setting, and events in this story are products of imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, real businesses, or actual events is purely coincidental and unintentional. This story is created for entertainment and to convey messages about kindness, human worth, and redemption. It should not be understood as an accurate depiction of any real person or organization.